Okay, so let's talk about one of the wildest stories in history. I mean, a story where the world's biggest sport doesn't just start a riot, it actually kicks off a full-blown military invasion.
I mean, it sounds completely insane, doesn't it? Soccer, the beautiful game, the thing that brings billions of people joy, somehow leads to tanks rolling across borders and actual airstrikes. But believe it or not, this isn't some movie script. This question is exactly what we're diving into today.
Because back in 1969, for two neighboring countries, El Salvador and Honduras, this totally unbelievable idea became a tragic and violent reality. So let's get into how this could possibly happen.
And you gotta understand, the timing here is everything. This wasn't just some friendly match. No, this was a super high-stakes series of games to qualify for the 1970 World Cup. The passion was already through the roof, but trust me, what was going on off the field, that was way, way more explosive.
Yep, that's what history actually calls it, the football war. It sounds kind of fake, right? Almost like a joke. But the war itself was deadly serious. It was quick, only about 100 hours, but the damage it caused, man, that would last for decades. And this is the most important thing to get. The soccer game wasn't the cause. It was the spark that lit the fuse.
So to really get what's going on, we have to hit rewind. We need to look way beyond the soccer stadium and see what was really happening. Think of it like a giant powder keg. All these political and social problems had been piling up for years, just waiting for something to set it off.
Okay, so here's the real problem. You've got El Salvador, right? Super densely populated, like the most crowded place in all the Americas. And almost all the good land is owned by a handful of rich families, so there's poverty everywhere. Then you have Honduras next door. It's way bigger, but it's also struggling economically. So this massive imbalance, it basically created a pressure cooker situation.
And that pressure had to go somewhere. It led to this huge wave of migration. We're talking about 300,000 Salvadoran farmers and their families moving into Honduras, just looking for a little bit of land and a chance to make a living. And for a while, it seemed okay, but it started causing some serious tension inside Honduras. And this was the moment everything changed. The Honduran government passed a new Land Reform Act. But here's the thing. Instead of dealing with their own wealthy landowners, they went after the Salvadoran immigrants. They started taking their land and kicking them out, sending thousands back to El Salvador. This created a huge refugee crisis, and tensions just went through the roof. And right then, at that exact moment, the World Cup qualifier gets announced.
So you see how the stage is set, right? You've got two countries just simmering with anger, nationalism, and this huge refugee problem. And now they have to go head-to-head on a soccer field for a shot at the World Cup. This was never going to be just a game. It was a proxy battle for national pride.
And just look at how fast it all went down. 3 matches in just a couple of weeks, and each game just cranks up the tension to a whole new, much more dangerous level.
Right, match number 1 is in the capital of Honduras. And the night before the game, the Salvadoran team's hotel is basically under siege by Honduran fans. I'm talking rocks being thrown, windows getting smashed, horns blaring all night long. They did everything they could to make sure the players were totally exhausted and scared out of their minds before the game even started. And you know what? It worked. Honduras won 1-0. But the reaction back in El Salvador was just devastating. A young woman, Amelia Bolaños, was apparently so heartbroken by the loss that she took her own life. Her funeral was then broadcast on national TV, and the government and media basically turned her into this national martyr. It just poured gasoline on the anti-Honduran fire.
So, 1 week later, it's time for match 2, this time in El Salvador. And the revenge was absolutely horrifying. The Honduran team's hotel gets attacked with things like dead rats and blood-soaked rags. I mean, can you imagine? The players were so terrified they had to be driven to the stadium in armored cars.
With all that going on, the Honduran team just crumbled. El Salvador won, 3-0. But the celebration was cut short by pure violence. 2 people were killed in the riots, and Honduran fans were literally running for their lives. It was just total chaos.
So with the series tied at 1 win each, they had to have a third and final playoff match. This one was on neutral turf in Mexico City. It was a nasty, brutal game, but El Salvador managed to pull off a win in extra time, 3-2. So on the field, the score was settled. But off the field, the real fight was just about to start. I mean, literally, the whistle blows to end the game in Mexico City, and on that very same day, El Salvador's government announces it's cutting all diplomatic ties with Honduras. That's it. The games had pushed them right over the edge. There was no going back. Diplomacy was dead.
And not even 3 weeks later, the conflict officially moved from the soccer pitch to the battlefield. The sound of cheering crowds was gone, replaced by the sound of gunfire and bombs.
So on July 14th it begins. The Salvadoran Air Force launches attacks. Then their army pours across the border. Honduras fights back with its own air raids on key targets. The fighting was intense, but thankfully the rest of the world stepped in. The Organization of American States, the OAS, managed to force the ceasefire just 4 days later. So just like that, the war was over in about 100 hours. But the real final whistle, the actual cost of all this, it was absolutely devastating, and its impact would be felt for a very, very long time. Think about this. In just those 4 days, around 3,000 people died. And it is so important to remember this. The vast majority of them weren't soldiers. They were just ordinary civilians caught in the middle of it all.
And the fallout, the long-term damage, was even worse. Tens of thousands of people lost their homes forever. The economy for both countries was completely wrecked. But maybe the most critical part is that all the chaos and displacement in El Salvador helped create the perfect storm for the brutal civil war that would break out there just 10 years later.
And after all that, what about the soccer? The whole reason this thing supposedly started. Well, El Salvador actually did it. After all that bloodshed, all that turmoil, they made it. They qualified for the 1970 World Cup.
And here is the most tragic, unbelievable irony of this whole story. After a war was literally fought over it, the team went to the World Cup in Mexico, and they got crushed. They lost every single game, and they didn't score a single goal. All of that for absolutely nothing.
The football war is just this dark, powerful reminder that sports are never just sports, are they? They get tangled up with national identity, with pride, with politics, and it really leaves you with this one kind of chilling question to think about. When you've got that much anger and nationalism boiling under the surface, at what point does a simple game just stop being a game?